And we wrap up today's Qnews News and with transition with the latest here in the top stories for this hour. The Israeli occupation army has launched a new wave of intense airstrikes across northern, eastern and southern Gaza, targeting areas including Gaza City and Qnews. The latest strikes come just a day after similar attacks on the region. Yesterday's airstrikes took place amid indirect negotiations between Israel and Hamas over a possible truce, which could include ending the war and the release of remaining Israeli detainees. The attacks shattered nearly 2 months of ceasefire, raising fears of fully reigniting the 17-month conflict. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has defended the renewed airstrikes on Gaza, stating that the ceasefire negotiations will continue only under fire. Netanyahu stressed that military pressure on Hamas is a critical condition for securing the release of Israeli detainees, declaring, "This is just the beginning." He added that the strikes were ordered after Hamas rejected proposals to extend the ceasefire and vowed to intensify military operations. Israeli airstrikes and evacuation orders have forcibly displaced Palestinian families from Beit Hanun in northern Gaza. Airstrikes targeted homes and tent encampments across multiple locations from the north to the south of the Gaza Strip. Meanwhile, Israeli tanks launched shelling from across the border, intensifying the situation on the ground. Thousands of Israelis have taken to the streets in an anti-government protest following the decision to resume attacks on Gaza. The demonstration began with a rally, followed by a march toward the Army and Defense Ministry headquarters. Protesters criticized Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu for ordering the strikes after Hamas rejected proposals to extend the ceasefire. Freed Hamas detainees have called for an end to the war and urgent return of 59 remaining detainees. One of the detainees urged international mediators to exert maximum pressure on Hamas, warning, "Time is running out and Israel must act now." Israel and Hamas blamed each other for violating the truce, which had largely held since January, providing temporary relief to Gaza's 2.3 million residents and widespread destruction. Acting U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations has stated that responsibility for the resumption of hostilities in Gaza lies only on Hamas, and the United States supports Israel in its next steps. She made the statement to the United Nations Security Council briefing. She said the United States President Donald Trump had made clear that Hamas must release the detainees it is holding immediately or pay a high price.
Including a bridge proposal to extend the ceasefire beyond Ramadan and Passover, to allow time to negotiate a framework.
At least 10 U.S. strikes have targeted areas in Yemen, including the capital Sana'a. The U.S. strikes against the Houthis were launched last Saturday, March the 15th, and are the biggest since U.S. military operation in the Middle East since President Donald Trump took office in January. The Houthis said they had launched scores of attacks on shippings after Israelis' war with Hamas began in late 2023, saying they were acting in solidarity with Gaza's Palestinians. The leader of Yemen's Houthi movement, Abdul Malik al-Houthi, has announced that his group will escalate actions against Israel in response to its continued assault on the Gaza Strip. Al-Houthi vowed to take all possible measures against Israel and pledged unwavering support for the Palestinian cause. Yesterday, Israeli airstrikes on Gaza killed more than 400 people, according to the Palestinian health authorities, marking the deadliest escalation in weeks after a ceasefire negotiation collapsed. Russian President Vladimir Putin has agreed to a proposal by U.S. President Donald Trump for a 30-day halt on attacks against energy infrastructure in Russia and Ukraine, issuing corresponding orders to the Russian military. The Kremlin stated that the two leaders had a detailed and frank exchange of views on Ukraine during a phone call. Putin emphasized that any resolution to the conflict must be comprehensive, sustainable and long-term, considering Russia's security interests and the root causes of the war. The discussion also covered the U.S. proposed 30-day ceasefire, which Ukraine had already accepted last week. The Kremlin noted that Putin raised concerns about monitoring the truce and preventing Ukraine from using it to mobilize troops and rearm. U.S. President Donald Trump has stated that aid to Ukraine was not discussed during his call with Russian President Vladimir Putin. The Kremlin mentioned that the Russian leader had called for an end to the military assistance for Kiev. The Kremlin added that after the Trump-Putin call, Putin also emphasized that any resolution of the conflict would require an end to all military and intelligence assistance to Ukraine.
Dramatic and immediate relief to working families. As you know, we inherited from the last administration an economic catastrophe and an inflation.
Russia's President Vladimir Putin's international cooperation envoy has stated that Russia sees big prospects to work with the United States, including the space sector. He also appointed by Putin, Kirill Dmitriev, appointed by Putin last month as his special envoy for international economic and investment cooperation, stated that Russia aims to collaborate with SpaceX CEO Elon Musk as part of Moscow's efforts to strengthen and develop its space agency. Roscosmos and the State Nuclear Corporation, Rastom, he also mentioned that he is in contact with Roscosmos, Russian business, and the American Chamber of Commerce in Russia.
Я уже говорил о том, что американские компании потеряли свыше $300 миллиардов.
This concludes our top stories in today's transmission. Thank you very much for watching, and until we meet again tomorrow, it's goodbye.